مرحبا بكم مشاهدينا في حوارات السياق. طالب وزير الخارجية الإماراتي الشيخ عبد الله بن زايد نظيره الأمريكي توني بلينكين في اتصال هاتفي بضرورة إعادة تصنيف جماعة الحوثي منظمة إرهابية حسب ما قال مسؤول إماراتي رفيع المستوى لموقع أكسيوس الأمريكي. عموما للمزيد من المتابعة حول هذا الملف ينضم إلينا سيد نورمان راول المسؤول السابق في وكالة المخابرات المركزية الأمريكية CIA. سيد نورمان مرحبا بك معنا.
Hello.
سيد نورمان، هل تعتقد أن الإدارة الأمريكية ستعيد تصنيف الحوثيين جماعة إرهابية بعد هجومها على منشآت مدنية في أبو ظبي؟ الإماراتيون بحسب أكسيوس طلبوا صراحة ذلك.
The administration is confronted with a series of significant evidence that the Houthis are acting as a terrorist organization, and that alone would make designation or redesignation likely. The problem is within the administration, there are going to be voices who will say that such a designation will make the delivery of humanitarian aid more difficult and even complicate the, albeit failing, but nonetheless still in existent peace process and negotiation. So that dynamic still continues to be underway, but the administration appears to be leaning towards redesignation as a terrorist organization, which I believe is appropriate.
طيب، وهنا هل يمكن فصل العقوبات عن الجانب الإنساني في حال إعادة الحوثيين على قوائم الإرهاب؟
I think it requires some thinking as to the architecture of that separation, because we need to keep in mind the Houthis use the people of Yemen as a shield. They use their ability to control the delivery of food, medicine, water, fuel as a way of gaining political pressure over the United Nations and the international community. So I think what needs to be done is not just the decision, but people need to devise the system by which that food and water and medicine will be delivered, despite Houthi attempts to exploit that situation. And that may take some time.
بيان الخارجية الأمريكية وصف الاعتداء على أبو ظبي بالعمل الإرهابي، لكنه لم يصف الحوثيين بالإرهابيين. هل هناك تناقض هنا؟ كيف تفسر ذلك؟
I think what you're watching is the evolution of US thinking. The Houthi attacks were launched against civilian targets that would have had mass casualties had they struck in slightly different areas. This is consistent with Houthi actions in Saudi Arabia and in the Red Sea. So there's no question that they resemble terrorist activity. But I think, again, the administration is being careful in its language while it completes this internal dialogue.
حقيقة تعليق البيت الأبيض على الهجمات كان قويا، لكن هل تعتقد أنه سيكون متبوعا بأي تحركات؟
I think it will be followed by moves. This was a serious attack on multiple civilian sites. There is no question that this was meant to kill innocents. And by the way, innocents not only from the United Arab Emirates, but multiple nationalities as well, to include Americans. This is hard to ignore. So some sort of decision will have to come about. I also think the administration will require some coordination within Congress. There are prominent voices in Congress who have stated that they don't believe the Houthis are terrorists. I think they're wrong, but the administration will want to conduct that dialogue as well as quickly as possible. And this is complicated by the Russian crisis that's going on at present. So the administration has its hands full.
طيب، هذا عن الموقف الأمريكي. ماذا عن الموقف الدولي والذي كان مساندا لأبو ظبي؟ هل ممكن أن تكون هذه نقطة تحول في التعامل العالمي مع ميليشيا الحوثي؟
Well, it certainly should be, but again, there are powerful voices in Europe who generally oppose coercive action against aggressive actors in the region. Consider how Europe has responded to Iran's repeated provision of equipment, training, and materiel that have enabled multiple terrorist actions, to include this action. These weapons were derived from Iranian support. But Europe tends to content itself with statements vice tough action. They tend to leave that to the United States.
حقيقة هناك دولة لم تكتفي بالبيانات. إسرائيل عرضت على أبو ظبي المساعدة والدعم بعد الهجمات. كيف تفهم ذلك؟
Well, Israel faces the same threat as Abu Dhabi, as the United Arab Emirates, and Saudi Arabia, Iranian missiles and drones in the hands of Iranian proxies are targeted against civilian targets with the aim of killing as many civilians as possible in an environment that contains many nationalities. So it's an identical situation. It's just a different geography. It's Israel's statement is consistent with how they see the world and how they should see the world, given that the threat is real.
هل يمكن تحميل الحوثي وحده مسؤولية الهجوم؟ لأن الأمور متجهة نحو هذا الاتجاه حتى لا تتأثر مفاوضات فيينا، يقول البعض.
No, I don't. Throughout the negotiations for the original nuclear agreement, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, Iran's regional aggression continued without any hesitation. Before, during, and after that nuclear deal, the Quds Force activity in the region continued in a similar fashion. Iran is able to separate these two actions. I should also say that Iran has insisted repeatedly that it will not discuss regional affairs in these talks. And the United States believes that regional affairs would be a complicating factor, and therefore it wishes to avoid this as well, along with Europe. So I think it would be a mistake to bring the nuclear talks into this issue.
المبعوث الأممي يبدأ جولة خليجية تليها جولة أوروبية لتخفيف التصعيد والعودة لطاولة المفاوضات. هنا نسأل، ما جدوى التفاوض مع الحوثي بما أن القرار العسكري والأمني والسياسي في يد طهران؟
Well, I think it's important that we always have channels of communications open so that when the Houthis see sense and decide to take peace for an answer, they have a way to pursue that option. But I think it's very unlikely at present that there will be any progress until the Houthis face additional military setbacks and they see how the international community responds to their act of terrorism.
في العالم العربي لدينا ميليشيات مسلحة تمولها إيران في أكثر من دولة، كيف يمكن التعامل معها؟
Well, you're correct. The Iranian militias all have a similar pattern. They use their local populations as a shield. They target civilian populations for mass casualty events. They employ cyber terrorism, propaganda. They shoot their opponents. Iran has created this axis of misery throughout the region, not an axis of peace. And where you see the Emirates in particular building interfaith dialogue and improving the lives of so many people in the region, it stands in stark contrast. So I think the best way to deal with this problem is first to build international coalitions, to insist upon severe punishments and not just statements, and then for the Emirates to do exactly what it's doing, which is to build a society and regional relationships that offer the people of the region a choice. Do you want to live in the misery of Iran, or do you want to live in the environment created by the leadership of the Emirates and its regional partners in Saudi Arabia and Israel and Bahrain and elsewhere?
هذا يدفعني لأسأل، العالم يتجه إلى اعتراف ضمني بطالبان وإن كان يصنفها إرهابية، كيف يمكنه مساندتنا لمواجهة ميليشيات إيران التي لا يصنفها الغرب إرهابية أساساً؟
We need to remember that Iran retained contact with elements of the Taliban, providing them with weapons and material support, just as Iran has retained routine contact with Al-Qaeda. There continues to be, according to public reports, an Al-Qaeda cell inside of Iran today with the full knowledge of the Iranian government, and the United States has talked about this annually. I think with the Taliban, the issue is going to be they have to demonstrate that they're different from their past versions. And this is difficult because many of the people in the Taliban government are from that previous government. Siraj Haqqani is a terrorist. And what they are doing against Afghan women is a form of social terrorism. Now, the problem remains also there's a humanitarian issue created by the Taliban. So for the international community, they must walk between punishing the Taliban, constraining the Taliban, and providing the aid that is needed by the poor people of Afghanistan. I think you will see the region withhold diplomatic recognition and the international community work to provide that aid in a way that minimizes the Taliban ability to steal it for their own purposes or to deny it from people they perceive not to be their allies.
سؤالي الأخير عن مفاوضات فيينا، هل تريد الولايات المتحدة إدارة بايدن إبرام اتفاق بأي ثمن؟
Well, the Biden administration has been rather clear and consistent. They believe that the return to a nuclear deal removes the potential of an Iranian nuclear weapon. Many people disagree with that, but they are the elected administration in Washington. The Iranians are seeking, in some ways, similar things to Vladimir Putin. Both Putin and the Iranians are trying to reshape how the international community deals with them. Iran wishes to destroy the international sanctions regime in its entirety. Putin and the Iranians wish to dominate their near neighborhood in a way that reshapes that topography. And finally, each wishes to cripple the ability of the United States to do anything in the future against their aggression. So Iran has this set of goals. The administration wishes to contain it on nuclear issues. It's going to be difficult, and it's going to require concessions on sanctions that many in the US will wonder, does that undercut our ability to punish Iran in the future for its actions? I apologize for going along, but let me add one more comment. If an Iranian missile were to strike an American facility, does the United States have the capacity under the nuclear deal to impose oil sanctions or banking sanctions? Many would say we do not, because if we did, Iran would walk away from a nuclear deal. So the administration has got some very difficult issues to consider during these talks. I think a deal is possible, but it's going to be very difficult.
شكرا سيد نورمان راول المسؤول السابق في وكالة المخابرات المركزية CIA للمشاركة معنا في حوارات السياق.
Thank you. My pleasure.
مشاهدينا شكرا على طيب المتابعة. إلى الملتقى.